wolves were not the worst part. Mara Delacroix would say that many times in the months that followed. To the park rangers, to the therapist, to the detective who drove 4 hours from the city just to sit across from her at a diner table and listen. The wolves, she said, behaved like wolves. What came after did not. On the morning of September 14th, Mara walked out of the Kessler Wilderness Area with pine needles in her hair, no phone signal, and 3 days of fear packed into her eyes. She was alive. She was coherent. She was grateful. But even then, standing at the trailhead, wrapped in a park ranger's jacket, she kept looking over her shoulder, not toward the trees, toward the road behind her. Welcome to the faint whisper, where the story never ends. It echoes.
A 29-year-old woman was recovered safely Tuesday morning after 3 nights lost in the Kessler Wilderness Area.
Mara Delacroix was not reckless. That matters. Because in stories like this, people want to believe the person did something wrong, took a wrong turn, ignored a sign, went somewhere they were told not to go. Mara did none of those things. She was an experienced hiker, 29 years old, a geological survey technician who spent half her working life outdoors. She knew trail maps. She knew weather patterns. She carried a compass on every trip, not on her phone, but a real one, brass, clipped to her pack strap. She had hiked the Ridgeback Trail twice before. On September 11th, she drove up to Kessler with 2 friends, Dominic and Priya. The plan was a 3-day loop, in through the north entrance, camp at the Hallow Lake Basin, out through the southern ridge by Sunday afternoon. Simple, mapped, planned. The first day went exactly as expected. They made camp by 5 p.m. The light was golden. Priya made instant coffee on a camp stove, and Dominic complained, as he always did, that it tasted like warm cardboard. Mara sat at the edge of the lake and watched the water go still as the wind died. She said later that she felt completely at peace that evening. She said the forest felt calm. She said she didn't notice the quiet until much later, until she thought back on it and realized there had been no birds calling when they made camp. Not one. The wolves came on the second morning. Low wind, a branch snap, silence. Mara woke first at around 6 a.m. Dominic and Priya were still in their tents. She had stepped maybe 40 yards off the trail to reach a rocky overlook she had spotted the evening before. She wanted to photograph the basin from above while the mist was still low on the water. She saw them before she heard them. 4 wolves, then 2 more emerging from the tree line to her left. Then another behind her, further back, barely visible through the pines. A large pack, 7, maybe 8 animals. They were not charging. They were not displaying typical threat behavior. No teeth, no raised hackles, no vocalizations. They were simply surrounding her, methodically, moving to close off the angles of escape with a patience that wildlife experts would later find deeply unusual. One ranger, a 15-year veteran named Owen Casts, reviewed Mara's account and said, off the record, that what she described sounded less like a predatory chase and more like a coordinated containment. His word, containment. Mara did everything correctly. She made herself large. She spoke in a low, firm voice. She did not run. She moved slowly backward toward a cluster of boulders and climbed. She stayed on top of the rocks for nearly 4 hours. The wolves stayed below. They did not pace. They did not howl. They sat. Occasionally one would move, shifting position, circling to a new point around the base of the boulders, but they were never agitated. They were, Mara said, almost organized. At around 10 a.m. they left, all at once, moving back into the trees in the same direction, as if responding to something she could not hear. Mara climbed down. She oriented herself with her compass. She began moving back toward camp, but the trail she found was not the one she had come from. She would spend 3 days alone in the Kessler Wilderness Area before finding her way out. This part of the story is important, not for the survival details, but for what she noticed. Dominic and Priya, for their part, had reported her missing by noon on that second day. Rangers entered the search area by 3 p.m., standard grid search. Drone units were deployed on day 2. They did not find her until she walked out herself. What Mara described during those 3 days was not the story of someone who was simply lost. On the first night alone, she made camp in a shallow rock overhang, about 1.5 miles from where she estimated the wolves had surrounded her. She was not injured. She had water, one remaining protein bar, and her emergency kit. She heard the wolves again that night, distant, howling in what she described as a call and response pattern. One voice, then another, then another. She said it sounded less like animals communicating and more like something was being counted off. She told herself she was tired, scared, that her mind was doing what minds do in isolation, finding patterns that weren't there. But then, sometime after midnight, she heard something else. Footsteps. Not wolf footsteps, not the pad of 4 paws. Slow, deliberate, 2-footed steps on the dry pine needles just beyond the edge of her overhang. She turned on her flashlight. Nothing. No eye shine. No movement. The steps had stopped the moment she moved. She lay still for a long time before she slept. On the second day, she traveled south by compass, following a creek drainage that she believed would lead to the southern trail system. She found a fire ring, old, stone-ringed, with ash that crumbled to dust when she touched it. No other signs of a camp. No trail markers nearby. She stayed near the fire ring because it was open ground and she could see in all directions. That afternoon, she heard something she had no explanation for. A voice. Her name. Once. Low. From the direction of the trees to her north. She would later say it sounded like no one she knew. Not Dominic's voice, not Priya's, not a ranger calling out on a search line. It was flat, she said, toneless, the way a word sounds when it is spoken by someone who learned it from a recording. She did not call back. She moved south, fast, for the rest of the afternoon. That night, she climbed a tree and slept wedged in the fork of a large pine, off the ground, her pack strapped to her chest. She did not hear footsteps, but when she climbed down at dawn, she found something at the base of the tree. A small pile of pine cones, arranged in a neat line. 7 of them, evenly spaced, pointing north. She counted them 3 times. She told herself an animal could have moved them. Wind, coincidence. She was tired and her mind was searching for meaning. She walked south. That morning, she found the trailhead. She recovered quickly by most accounts. That was the thing people noticed. No significant trauma response. No nightmares in the first weeks. She spoke about the experience clearly, calmly, with the kind of careful language someone uses when they are very deliberately trying not to sound irrational. She moved back into her apartment in the city. She went back to work within 10 days. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 weeks later. Her neighbor, a retired school teacher named Greta, who lived directly across the hall, knocked on her door one Tuesday evening to ask if Mara had been standing in the hallway the night before. Around 2 a.m., Mara had not. Greta described seeing a shape through her door's peephole, standing still, just outside Mara's apartment. She had assumed it was Mara and gone back to bed. Mara checked her door. No marks, no signs of tampering. Building security reviewed the hallway footage from that night. The camera covering her floor had gone to static at 1:47 a.m. It came back on at 2:23 a.m. 36 minutes of static. The building manager could not explain it. The camera had no history of malfunctions. It did not malfunction again after that night. Mara bought a chain lock and said nothing to anyone. Over the following 2 weeks, small things accumulated. She worked from home on Fridays, and she began noticing the same car parked across the street on those days. Always a dark-colored sedan. Different plates each time. She photographed 3 of them. 2 came back as registered vehicles with no violations, belonging to people in a neighboring zip code. The 3rd plate did not appear in any registry her contact at the DMV could find. She mentioned this to Dominic. He told her she was still processing the trauma. He was not unkind about it. He was just wrong. Then came the phone calls. 4 calls over 9 days. Unknown numbers. When she answered, there was nothing. Not silence exactly, but a quality of sound she struggled to describe. She said it was like being in a large, empty room, like something was listening on the other end of an open line. On the fourth call, she heard her name, the same flat voice. She hung up and sat on her kitchen floor for a long time. She called Priya that night. Priya listened to everything. Then Priya said something that Mara didn't know what to do with. She said, "Mara, I have to tell you something. The night you went missing, the second night, Dominic and I both heard something outside our tents. We didn't tell you because we didn't want to scare you." Mara asked what they heard. Priya said, "Footsteps, two-footed, around 2 a.m. We thought it was you coming back, but when we looked, no one was there." The detective who drove 4 hours to meet with Mara was named Ray Solis. He had worked missing persons and wildlife incidents in the region for 11 years. He had agreed to meet with her off the record because a ranger friend of his had passed along her account and said it matched something he had seen before. Not wolves, not the survival story, the after. Detective Solis told Mara that in the past 6 years, he had quietly collected reports from 3 other people who had experienced extended wilderness incidents in the Kessler area. All 3 had emerged physically unharmed. All 3 had, in the weeks following, reported unexplained sounds near their homes, camera malfunctions, calls from unknown numbers, and a recurring sense of being observed. 2 of those 3 had moved out of state within a year. The third had not been heard from in 18 months. Mara asked him what he thought it was. He said he didn't know, but he said there was something she should be aware of. Something he had not told her at the start of the meeting. He slid his phone across the diner table. On the screen was a still image, captured from a trail camera mounted by a wildlife researcher near the southern trailhead of Kessler. The timestamp read September 13th, the night before Mara walked out. The image showed the edge of the trail, and on that trail, barely at the edge of the frame, stood a shape. Upright, still, facing the camera directly. It was not a wolf. It was not a bear. The shape had been there, in that same position, in every photo the camera took between midnight and 4 a.m. 14 images. Same position, same stillness. Detective Solis told Mara he had sent the image to 3 separate analysts. 2 said motion blur. 1 said he couldn't identify it and declined to comment further. Mara stared at the image for a long time. Then she asked him, "How many pine cones?" Solis looked at her. He hadn't mentioned anything about pine cones. He turned the phone back toward himself and zoomed in on the base of the nearest tree in the frame. He counted them slowly. 7, evenly spaced, pointing north. Mara Delacroix still lives in the city. She has not returned to any wilderness area since September. She keeps her chain lock on at night. She no longer answers calls from unknown numbers. She told Detective Solis one last thing before they parted ways that afternoon at the diner. She said, "The wolves surrounded me for 4 hours. They never touched me. They kept me in one place for 4 hours, and then they left. I used to think they were hunting me." She picked up her coffee. "Now I think they were keeping me there, so something else could find me first." Whatever walked out of the Kessler Wilderness Area with Mara Delacroix that September morning, it did not stop at the trailhead. Be careful what you bring home from the dark. If this story stayed with you, it was supposed to. Subscribe to The Faint Whisper, because the next story is already waiting, and it already knows your name.